say Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome. We're going to have a special type of meeting tonight. It's going to be more of a presentation on the topic of issue 3, which has to do with setting up a monopoly in marijuana in Ohio. We considered it a very important issue, something that we should speak out on. We passed a resolution on Tuesday, the Board of Commissioners opposing issue 3. A number of esteemed folks are here to talk to you about this issue tonight. I think you know most of them. Judge Grindell on the end, Dr. Nicholson next to him with the patch on, Sheriff Dan, and Judge Topeka, and Craig Swenson from our Jobs and Family Services organization, all of whom are involved with organizations that will be directly impacted by the outcome of this issue. I'm a little disappointed we don't have this room packed out tonight, because this is an extremely important issue in our county, across the state. So with that said, I don't want to take any more of their time. We're going to turn this over to them. It's an opportunity for them to discuss with you and to talk to you about their thoughts on this important issue. So I don't know if any of the other commissioners want to say anything before they get started. No. With that said, I'll leave it to the panel. We may chime in every so often, and so let's start with
lady go first.
With the lady. I'll leave it to them to determine the best order.
Still your thunder.
Thank you, Commissioner Claypool, Mr. Leary, Rear. Welcome, everybody. Glad you are in attendance today. Oh, no, you hear me? I've never heard that before. Can you hear me now? Okay. So let me like this. All right. Welcome, everybody. We had this panel presentation about a little over 2 weeks ago at Westwoods, and I thank the commissioners for redoing it, so to speak. I think, as Commissioner Claypool said, it is an issue on either side that affects every one of us in this room, every one of us in this county, every one of us in this state. My vantage point, or what I'm going to speak about today, is what I've read about from Colorado, a 182-page report from the Rocky Mountain High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, who has done their third annual report on the marijuana effects or consequences since both commercialization, legalization for medical purposes, and then the legalization of recreational purposes. They did kind of like a phase-in thing over the last 7 years. But as many of you may or may not know, I was given the opportunity about 3.5 years ago to start the opiate task force here in Geauga, and from what I see, this is a great tie-in. I was actually at the DEA's office today for a visit, and they were talking about the massive fentanyl, which is extreme high-intensity heroin, and how it's affecting our communities, and people are dying. They had all these charts about overdose deaths, and they say if the marijuana issue passes, it will only get worse. From what I see, marijuana is a gateway drug. It's not to say every marijuana person who uses marijuana is going to escalate to heroin, but I've yet to see a person who's a heroin addict start with either pills, alcohol, and or marijuana. The bill as it's proposed in Ohio will create 1,159 marijuana stores, or pot stores as we call them. That's more than all the Starbucks and McDonald's combined, and 3 times the amount of liquor stores in the state of Ohio. As you may or may not heard, I'm sure either you've received literature in the mail or seen a commercial just about 10 times a day on TV. 10 wealthy investors will probably make millions while jeopardizing the rest of Ohioans. It's really not something you can buy into. It will be 10 grow farms after 4 years. If there's not enough supply by the 10 grow farms, then there will be one more added. But it's not something that, you know, average Joe farmer in the state of Ohio can just think he can, because he has a farm, start growing plants. What we've seen, or what the 182-page report from Colorado has said, is that there's a 40% increase in suspensions for school-age students. At one point in time last year, 51% of high school students were said to have possessed marijuana. There's a 38% increase in hospitalizations due to poisonings from marijuana because of the either edibles, which for my world, I don't know what market they're really targeting. I don't know many adults that eat gummy bears. Maybe Kit Kats and Reese's Cups, I'll admit, but the edibles from the marijuana being injected has caused many youths to, you know, think it's a Kit Kat or a Reese's Cup on mommy's table, and it ends up being infused with high levels of marijuana. Traffic fatalities involving marijuana in Colorado are up 92%. Regular accidents involving marijuana, not fatalities, are up 100%, while other accidents involving alcohol and just, you know, accidents maybe sliding in the snow, no substance abuse involved, have all gone down. The Department of Labor says that last year, $81 billion was lost in productivity because of marijuana in the workplace. Those of you who have businesses might want to consider. I know Sheriff Dan does a great presentation, and he'll talk more about the workplace issues. You can talk to any doctor. Any doctor will tell you there's no such thing as medical marijuana. If you've seen that commercial with the 4-year-old epileptic child, what do you think she's going to do? Go smoke a joint? No. There are some medical benefits in combination with some of the elements of marijuana, but marijuana alone is not approved by the FDA, and it takes 8. To get approved by the FDA, you have to have 8 characteristics for a substance to be approved as a medicine. Marijuana doesn't meet one of those. Right now, in any state in the United States, you can get a form. It's called Marinol, Dronabinol. It's not a Schedule I drug. It has some cannabinoid oil benefits from the marijuana, but it's not narcotic, and that can be used to treat some of the things like epilepsy, high stages of cancer in that form. You don't need to smoke it. Dr. Michelson will go into more about the usage in that regard. You also have some things that people don't consider: homelessness, because of all the people that are moving to Colorado. They can't afford housing, but they can buy their pot. Electric demands. Those of us who are concerned about resources, the average electric bill to keep a grow farm going is about $20,000 to $50,000 a month. Electricity usage in Colorado is escalated to up 40%. Those are just some of the things I'm concerned about. What I see every day, we do not need another substance of abuse to be legalized. It's been decriminalized, so if you want to smoke a joint in your house, have less than 100 milligrams, you can do so. You're not harming anyone. So, turn it over. Okay, thank you.
Great job.
I don't want to say you're not harming anybody. I shouldn't say that, but you're allowed to do it without consequences other than a $150 fine if you're caught.
Yeah. And I'd like, can you guys hear me if I talk this loud? All right, good. I don't need that. It'll probably really hurt people's ears. Anyway, I'd like to give a family perspective. As executive director of Geauga Job and Family Services, we service the families, and we see the impact each and every day that drug and alcohol abuse has on families, as well as we work a lot with the juvenile court with dealing with issues of cases that are before juvenile court, addressing those issues and the impacts on family. It's been unbelievable. Since 2011, we were seeing maybe one two heroin, related cases, or, maybe a crack case here, or maybe, a marijuana case here. But it really, is something has changed in our society. As it relates to, kids that we have a record number of kids that are in our custody, in a large part due to, drug and alcohol abuse. Back in 2011, our agency averaged, on a monthly basis, of having 27 children, Geauga County children, in our custody that we're responsible for their care, custody, and control. Those are children that are, placed in foster homes, in the youth center, and some in residential treatment facilities. However, back in the last full calendar year that we've had, that number has skyrocketed to an average in 2014 to 66. And just as it relates to drug and alcohol abuse and heroin, that number has increased by over 400% of the cases that are tied to drug and alcohol abuse. That's the largest portion of the kids that we have in custody. That's the largest portion that's growing. And now we're facing this issue, with this being on the ballot. Our caseworkers that are going out to work with these families are already hearing the excuses from the parents. Oh, marijuana, it's not that big of a deal, it's on the ballot. The framework and the frame of mind of the parents that we're dealing with has just completely changed. The moral compass that, we have has completely changed. And so we want to ask, what is the next layer of the onion that, people are ready to peel back? Soon we're going to have nothing left that we deem to be, sacred and moral. And with respect to this stuff, this is now going to be in our homes, in your neighbors' homes. You're under the proposed, I think you're allowed to be growing 4 marijuana plants, which is way more than I think considered for personal use. And I used the example last presentation. I have little kids, and my kids get invited to birthday parties that I don't even know the kid, but it's in the school, and now we have to worry about what's in that home. And some people, the excusers will say, oh, well, it's just like alcohol. Well, no, it's not. They're marketing this in brownies and gummy bears and candy and things of that nature, and now you don't know if they're going to be exposed to growing marijuana plants in these homes. And it's an unknown. I was at a conference last week in Colorado, or not in Colorado, sorry. I was at a conference in Columbus, and there was a presenter that was presenting, and she came from Colorado, and I thought it was a perfect chance to ask, what is it like? And she's describing things like, oh, I'm driving on the freeway, you can smell it. I was at the mall, you can smell it around you. It's going to invade our personal space, whether we like it or not. It's going to change the look of what, I imagine walking with your kids through the mall. What's that? Dad, what's that, Mom? It's going to change not just, what's in privately, but it's going to change the look and feel of what's around us and what's influencing our kids. And in this day and age, with children in addiction, whether it's your iPhone or your tablet or whatever, there's enough challenges with our parents that are facing today, with addiction issues. And this is just one huge thing that's going to be, added to that. And it's hard enough in this day and age, to raise our kids. Years ago we used to say there's a war on drugs. So what is it now? Are we just telling our kids we're giving up? We're just going to, make it easier for, what happened to that? And why are we, essentially saying, yes, it's okay to have yet another thing that impairs your judgment, your motor skills, and decreases motivation? I think we have enough, in the generation of people and youth, that are growing, aging out of, foster care system that don't have any motivation as it is. Why are we just going to sanction one other excuse to not be motivated? We want to see, the youth in our community motivated to achieve great things, the American dream. And as it relates, just a couple of, I thought, really important statistics. In Colorado, and this comes from the same report that Judge Topeka was talking about. Ages 12 to 17, the national average of marijuana use is 7.15%. Colorado, 11.16%. Ages 18 to 25, national average 18.91%. Colorado, 29.05%. And you'll see the same thing, ages 26 and above, it nearly doubles, 5.45%, and then goes to 10.13% for Colorado. Another thing that I think is staggering, that just in dealing with the medical world, is in Colorado, the increase in marijuana-related ER visits. Back in 2011, it was 8,197. It got legalized in 2012, I believe, 12?
That is start for medical purposes. 14 has been recreational, 2014.
And that jumped in 2014, it more than doubled, 18,255 marijuana-related ER visits. Hospitalizations, back in 2000, marijuana-related was 2,539. It skyrocketed 2014 to 11,439 marijuana-related hospitalizations. And homelessness, the judge was talking about that. 14,000 homeless beds were provided, 14,232 in 2013. 2015 already, 87,252 homeless beds provided. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's destroying, the state of Colorado. There's some statistics that say if it was voted now that it wouldn't pass. And we can't let this come to Ohio. It's being marketed in a way like never before. Every other state that's legalized both medical, has medical and recreational use, did medical first. Ohio would be the first state to do both at the same exact time. And on top of it, they're backdooring it into our Constitution. Sacred document that we all should be holding very carefully and protecting. I mean, this is essentially creating a drug cartel and putting it in our Constitution, and it's just not right. And you're going to see it impact everybody, and just in your own surroundings. So, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for the commissioners for sponsoring this. As the juvenile court judge for Geauga County, I can't tell you how to vote, nor will I try to, but I can tell you this. From a perspective of protecting our children and dealing with our children, the passage of issue 3 is going to be a nightmare. If somebody came to you and said, let's use the Ohio Constitution to create a monopoly that's going to increase traffic deaths, increase the poisoning of our children, and increase the diminished capacity of our youth, why would anybody jump up and say this is a great idea? But somehow if you add the phrases in front of it, it's going to create jobs and generate taxes, people think it's genius. To start with, the Ohio Judicial Conference has taken the position that putting monopolies in the Ohio Constitution is a bad idea, whether it's for gambling, or whether it's for marijuana, or whether it's what's going to come down the pike next, which will probably be somebody who says, let's legalize prostitution. We'll have 8 or 10 spots, we'll create lots of jobs, and generate lots of tax dollars, and it'll be safer anyhow, and you won't have to see your ads in Scene magazine. So, I mean, you laugh, but that's really what's happened to this process. We're using our Constitution to protect vice. And I don't know where that comes from. The Constitution of Ohio was changed in 1912 to allow the people to do initiatives, not with the idea that some slick, well-heeled people will put monopolies for vice in it, but that the general public would be able to introduce things that the legislators would not listen to them for, to provide needed changes for the protection of society as a whole, not harm for the citizens of Ohio. If you came in the door today, or you want to get one of these on the way out, there's what you all know as a gummy bear. And today in Ohio, this is a gummy bear. Today in Colorado, infused with marijuana, and in a couple months, if this thing passes next week, infused in Ohio with marijuana, will be a stoner bear. Now you won't even know if you're eating a stoner bear or a gummy bear. If somebody just puts a whole plate of it out there at a Halloween party. And if you're a 13 or 14-year-old kid and somebody has an idea to have a little fun, this is what we're going to see in Ohio. I think it's important to remember what Mr. Swenson said. There's a poll out that if Coloradoans were asked how to vote on this issue, they would repeal it. That should tell you a lot. But I will tell you what it looks like from my perspective. We already have a marijuana problem in Geauga County with our youth. It's already there. It's the drug of choice that I deal with every day in juvenile court. Go talk to the schools. Go talk to law enforcement. Marijuana is the underage drug of choice in Geauga County. It's not going to get better if it gets legalized, and all you have to do is go back to that study from Colorado. As Judge Topeka pointed out, there was a dramatic increase in underage use of marijuana in Colorado after it was legalized. Ask yourself, why is that? Because in Colorado, the use of marijuana underage is still illegal. You look at the other part of the poll. 29% of the underage users of marijuana today in Colorado using legal marijuana get it from their parents. 21% using legalized marijuana are getting it from other adult family members. So that means 50% of the legal marijuana being used illegally by juveniles in the state of Colorado is coming from their very families. Anybody doesn't think that's going to start happening in Ohio needs to spend the day in my court and see what's going on out there. We're going to have to deal with this, and they say it's going to create jobs. I guarantee you it's going to create jobs. It's going to create more jobs for the sheriff, more jobs for Judge Topeka, a lot more jobs for Mr. Swenson, and a lot more jobs for my court. I'm going to need more probation officers. We're going to have more detention officers. We're going to have to deal with the fact that the marijuana problem we already have is going to expand geometrically because of the ease of access. In Colorado, they actually take the legal package and then use it for a black market sale of illegal marijuana. How does Sheriff Dan know when he sees the package if it was illegally bought or illegally made marijuana? It's going to be a nightmare, and we're going to have to deal with it. So the jobs we're going to create are going to cost the taxpayers, as the commissioners will well know, and it's going to be, nobody I think has really assessed the counter cost of this, possibly in the state of Ohio. And last but not least, from my perspective, if anybody tells you that marijuana is not a gateway drug, they haven't spent much time sitting in a courtroom. The problem isn't that if you use marijuana, you're guaranteed to use heroin. The problem is if you use marijuana, you're more likely to not see the danger in the use of heroin or hang around with people who introduce you to heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. And every drug evaluation I have read in the last 2 years reads like this. And don't forget, I'm talking about people who are anywhere from 14 to 35 years old, cases where we've taken the children away to give them to Mr. Swenson's folks. They read like this. I started using alcohol when I was 11 or 12, stole it from the parents' liquor cabinet. Started smoking marijuana when I was 12 or 13 or 14. And then somewhere along the line, got myself a little coke, maybe tried a little meth, didn't like what meth did to me, and then suddenly heroin popped on the scene. Heroin today in Cuyahoga County costs $5 a hit, which was less than the bags of gummy bears I paid for this evening. It's cheap, and it's out there. But people don't wake up and say, give me heroin. They start up the path. And as I know, Dennis is going to tell you, there's no guarantee just because you use heroin that you're going to be an addict to heroin. It's my impression that heroin is easier for the folks to adjust to if they've already been using marijuana and they've already felt the highs and don't think they're getting enough highs. So from my perspective, I don't know why we want to make 10 people richer at the expense of our children, and I am praying that issue 3 doesn't pass next week. Thank you, Dennis.
My name is Dennis Michelson. I'm the Executive Director for the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Geauga County, and also the Treatment Manager for the Lake County Drug Court, working with Judge Trevids. And I work with all these folks here, work with all courts in the county and with law enforcement, and appreciate being able to be here tonight. I try to be very objective about these things and not just do a knee-jerk reaction. I really didn't want to get involved in this whole marijuana debate. I've been so busy burying people from heroin overdoses. And I mean that literally. I've got another one next week. I had another one last week. And it's hard for me to get pumped up about marijuana because what I've heard for the last 8 years in the jail treatment program, when I do a drug or alcohol assessment, I have to go through a whole list, a plethora of drugs and pharmaceuticals and ask people, you know, what kind of drugs you use. And of course, most of my clients wouldn't even answer marijuana because they don't consider it a drug. They're eagerly awaiting the legalization of marijuana. And the thing is, I think one of the things that I want to emphasize tonight is, if this is approved, then marijuana use will increase. There's no doubt about that. Now, I think addiction will remain about the same, but marijuana use will increase. You've got some people that use, some who abuse, and some who are addicted. And a lot of times your family history and your environment and all do a lot more than the availability of the substance. I hope you're all aware that you can get marijuana tonight if you want it. You can get it next week if you want it. It doesn't matter who votes and how they vote. If somebody wants to get marijuana, they can get marijuana. And I'm glad that they make the distinction tonight that just because a lot of people use marijuana doesn't mean they're going to be addicted to heroin. And quite frankly, the majority of people that use marijuana don't get addicted to marijuana. So addiction is something to be distinguished from use or even abuse. And I don't want to go into all that tonight. But one of the things that really has astounded me about this, and I've been privileged to sit with Judge Grindell a little bit, and he's got me thinking about this. My dad, I'm from the South, you figured that out already. And my dad said, Dennis Lee, don't ever take a fence down until you find out why it was put up there in the first place. Now, if you've ever lived on a farm, you know that's probably good wisdom. You're out there taking a fence down, and then you find out there was a reason the fence was there, and you get gored or run over or shot or whatever. And I don't understand, and you know, I'm a clinician, I'm a whatever, but just from common sense, if you've got a couple of states out there that are going through the process, why can't we just wait and see how it all pans out? They promised all this revenue and said all of this is going to happen and that is going to happen. Why not wait a few years and just see how it pans out? But now we're rushing into this process, not only to deal with medical marijuana, and there's some merit to that argument, but to put the wolf in sheep's clothing with medical marijuana, and then put recreational use in there, and then ensconce it in your Constitution. I don't know that I would want to put a good thing in the Constitution just because I liked it. But I know that something must be motivating someone to rush this into the Constitution knowing you can't get it out. And I think it may have less to do with marijuana and a lot more to do with money. And let's talk about money for just a minute. I was in a meeting a few months ago, and I was just listening, and Commissioner Claypool was there. And there was a judge in another county who was trying to convince him of the merits of treatment or whatever. And I think the statement he made was, if you'll spend $1 for treatment, you'll save $7 on incarceration. Or you might save 1 in 7, 1 in 8, 1 in 5, or whatever, but the whole idea is that treatment is cost effective. Well, a lot of times, the dollar that you spend on treatment is sometimes wasted because the treatment is ineffective. And the treatment is not always efficacious. It's not always good. So again, you always have to step back and say, all treatment's not the same. There's good, bad, and ugly treatment. But just from a treatment angle, hundreds of times, I was in the jail for a little over 7 years doing the treatment program there. And as the judge mentioned, how did you start? Well, you start with alcohol. Well, why is that? Well, it's available. It's in the home. That will probably change over to marijuana now if it's legalized, because it'll be in the home. I'll guarantee you, most of my clients would prefer the pot to the alcohol, okay? And there are a lot of reasons for that. But a concern of mine is that our American system, the way that we do things legally and treatment-wise, has not worked with regard to addiction. Now, use and abuse, you can incarcerate somebody, you can issue punishment. If somebody's a user or an abuser, they might see the light, get the message, get a shiver in their liver, or whatever it is they need, and they'll straighten up and fly right. We all know people that probably smoked a lot of pot, drank a lot of booze, they graduated from college, got a job, became responsible, and they either quit or they cut back. Well, those aren't addicts, okay? Just always make that distinction. Our system is almost devised to keep addicts, you know, by the way we do it. So I think we can improve that. But now you inject this issue with potentially legalizing a substance. Well, yes, it is, in a sense, a gateway drug, but so are broken homes. Broken homes are gateways to addiction. Environmental things, family history, there are a lot of gateways into addiction. But to my viewpoint, the choice that we're looking at is between an illegal cartel and a legal cartel. To me, that's what it looks like. Now, you can play semantics with monopoly and say, well, you've got 10 here and this, that, and everything else. But do we want to try to minimize, you'll never eradicate, but do you try to minimize the illegal cartel by putting in a legal cartel? And there might be some possible advantage to that. I would say, if you're interested in that, read a book called Chasing the Scream. Chasing the Scream. It makes a pretty good case for trying to move the illegal cartel out by putting a legal one in. But the medical marijuana thing, now most of you know there are hundreds of elements or components within marijuana, THC, or whatever. And in a lot of your good drugs that you take, you know, I take lisinopril every day, I take Toprol, and I take Lipitor generic, and I'm glad it's generic now because it was way too expensive when it wasn't, for a heart condition, okay? And a lot of your pharmaceuticals do come from trees and plants and all of those kinds of things, and that's true. And there's probably plenty of merit to extract from marijuana certain substances to make helpful pharmaceuticals. And the absolute worst delivery system for a medicine is to smoke it, okay? And so if you put it in a pill or you put it in a capsule and you get the FDA to approve it, that's fine. But medical marijuana, as they're using it now, is an oxymoron. You know, they're leading people to believe that, you know, I deal a lot with mental health issues as a NAMI director. 50–60% of our people that have mental health issues have comorbid or co-occurring substance abuse issues. That's pretty much common knowledge. And the thing is, some folks in desperation, some folks in trying to adapt to the symptoms of what they're going through, have found that smoking marijuana does help them, okay? At least they think it helps them, and they may be right. It may do something to assuage their symptoms. We call it self-medication. We talk about that all the time. But there's already on the market, approved by the FDA, similar medicines that have already been approved that people could take if they want to get rid of the anxiety or the depression or whatever. But the thing is, a lot of folks don't want to take a pill to deal with the symptoms. They want to get high. They want to put Novocaine on their soul and have a minute of respite from the suffering and everything. And the thing is, that gets into this whole thing of addiction. And of course, to smoke it and all the health issues there, I'm not even going to touch that one tonight. But if you're going to deal with a problem in the public sector, there's always three things you have to address. This is classic public health 101. You have to deal with the agent, the host, and the environment. Let me say that again. The agent, the host, and the environment. The agent is a substance. Okay, years ago, this country tried to prohibit the agent. It was called prohibition. Okay? If you only deal with the agent and you don't deal with the host, that's the person. And I think all of these people know that we've had a cataclysmic paradigm shift in our society where we've gone from morals to mores, and homes are broken, and when homes are broken, eggs are going to get cracked in the nest. If we don't address the host, the individual, and the environment, the culture, then we can ban every agent there is, and we've not even touched the problem. And I hope we see that. The easiest part is to restrict the agent. And I'm all for that. Let's restrict the agent. It's not something that ought to be bound into the Constitution. It's a bad idea. But if we think by restricting the agent and not addressing the host and the environment, we're just whistling by the graveyard. I say this when I get in front of people from time to time. I say drugs and alcohol are not the problem. It's the way people have learned to deal with their problems. And the thing is, marijuana is not the problem. The problem is if people think marijuana is a way to deal with their problems. Then you can begin to work on the real problem. The substance is associated with it, but it's usually not at the core of the issue. I think, and I talked to Dr. Perrin about this from time to time, I think if you vote yes, about 85% of your people will probably increase their use of marijuana. Some will use it, some abuse it, but about 15% will just be addicts and they'll keep on, okay? If it's a no vote, you'll have about the same percentage. But the usage will increase because a lot of people don't use pot today because it's illegal. And by the way, unless I didn't get the memo federally, it's still illegal. And you've got that whole issue to deal with also, and I'm sure that I'll let the sheriff handle that one. If you don't have a demand for marijuana, then you don't need a supply. There's going to be a demand for marijuana. I think the issue that you have to think about in this vote is who's going to supply it, an illegal cartel or a legal one? Okay? I hope you'll think about that because I think that the war on drugs has failed. That's my opinion. We need to have a war on addiction. I think that is the greater problem. And I don't think we've really addressed that. And we put together a system that's almost designed perfectly to keep addicts in addiction by the way that we treat it. We call it a disease out of one side of our mouth, but treat it like something else out of the other side.
Good evening. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you folks for taking time out of your evening to come. I'm Dan McCullough, Geauga County Sheriff, you probably guessed that. And I have some serious concerns marijuana, if issue 3 passes, how is it going to impact our community? I'm concerned not just professionally. I live here. My family lives here. We have very close ties. There's a number of statistics that bother me. The first is the Geauga County statistics. I half jokingly tell people I run the largest hotel in the county. There might be some truth to that. Tragically, it's become the largest rehab center in the county. What that means, if we could take substance abuse in all forms out of our culture, approximately 95%, this is a low estimate, independent, my jail administrator agreed with me, 95% of our inmates wouldn't be in jail. Now, they're not all there because they got caught dealing or in possession of illegal or substance. They're there because of the other crimes that are committed as well. They're there because of driving while intoxicated. They're there because of theft, burglaries, robberies, trying to feed a habit. They're there because of the domestic violence that occurs when our thought process is clouded by substance abuse. Okay? I think you begin to see the picture. Our average jail population hovers around 130, 140 inmates every day. 95% wouldn't have to be there. Scary. The homeless population is reported increased significantly in Colorado and in Washington, another state that has legalized it. In Colorado, the number of overnight beds provided at shelters by the Salvation Army, a reliable source, increased 285% after recreational marijuana was legalized. Now, the shelter will meet their needs for food, perhaps lodging. Who meets their needs for the money to purchase marijuana? Do they resort to crime? I think statistically you would agree. Are they going to steal, shoplift, break into cars? Yeah, statistically that's a safe conclusion. Marijuana seriously impairs a person's ability to drive. States that have legalized it have seen a significant increase. Since legalizing marijuana in 2012, the state of Washington has seen an 83% increase in DUI, driving under the influence, cases with a marijuana positive blood test. That's a significant jump. That means you got 83% more people tonight when you leave here to drive home that are impaired. Think about that. Legalizing marijuana will result in more marijuana and drug-related problems in our schools. Since Colorado legalized marijuana, the number of drug-related suspensions and expulsions in schools increased by 40%. See, we don't make our best decisions when we're under the influence. It follows the same with our children. Edible marijuana products, we talked about that. Gummy bears, what do you call those?
Stoner bears.
Stoner bears. Okay. The Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Center has seen a 265% increase in the number of marijuana-related exposures in children under the age of 5. Under the age of 5. Anybody here have children, grandchildren? Okay. You think they know that the gummy bear is not a stoner bear? I mean, think about that. Gummy bear. Since legalization, marijuana-related traffic deaths in Colorado have increased 92%. During the same time period, all traffic deaths only increased 8%, which accounts for perhaps a growth in the number of cars. 92% increase. We would have twice as many traffic fatalities resulting from people under the influence in Geauga County. That's a scary statistic that bothers me. I hear tell, and one of the claims that I get is, marijuana's not that bad. A little over a year ago, in Middlefield Township, anyone here from Middlefield? Hayes Road, 87, the apartment buildings, you know where I'm talking about. 2 o'clock in the morning, a stranger, under the influence of marijuana, breaks into an apartment and kidnaps a 2-year-old child off the couch that was sleeping in the apartment. Hallucinating. Marijuana's not harmful. Who are we kidding? A stranger who went out and hallucinated, trying to give that child away by flagging cars down, holding the baby. Thank God we were able to recover the youngster unharmed. What if that, do we want to see an increase in that kind of activity? Marijuana is safe. It was a little over a month ago in Lake County, I believe, Willoughby, Wilton, a woman drove a car into someone's home, smashed into it under the influence of marijuana. See, we're not talking just how the user of marijuana is impacted. In both those last two scenarios I gave, innocent people were impacted by individuals under the influence of marijuana. Colorado has seen that 40% of the marijuana being sold on the black market. Okay? 40%. I think you mentioned it's going to be hard to detect which is legit, which isn't. It invites the black market. One of the things that we're not thought about a lot is marijuana in the workplace. I've had occasion to talk to two significant businesses in Geauga County, Great Lakes Cheese and Kraft Maker, significant employers, talked to management. Both assured me they would never move a manufacturing facility to Colorado since the legalization of marijuana. I asked why. He said because as employers, they're required to provide a drug-free, safe workplace under OSHA. Commissioner Spitaleri and I, working in a factory. I drive a tow motor. 3 weeks ago, I'm at a good party. I spoke with marijuana. And I strike you with that and injure you with that forklift, that tow motor. Marijuana will remain in your system for up to a month. I am going to test positive as the operator of the tow motor for marijuana. The company is going to get fined for failure to provide a drug-free workplace. And you just got a golden lawsuit handed to you for your injuries. I don't see how this brings business, sustainable business, to Geauga County. Both of them told me that story. I hadn't even thought of that aspect of it. In closing, my father passed away a few years ago from cancer. Those of you who may have experience it, understand it can be a horrible way to go. The end was difficult. There's no doubt in my mind, my father was addicted to Percocets. Percocet, very strong prescription painkiller, is an opioid like heroin is an opiate. It never crossed my mind that my dad should take heroin instead. When something is reduced to pill form, in a sanitary environment, in a laboratory setting, in measurable quantities for dosage, that's a whole lot different than smoke a joint. Unfortunately, if issue 3 passes, my business is going to be good. It's going to be good because I'm going to see a 92% increase in traffic fatalities in accident responses. I'm going to see a 285% increase in homelessness, vagrancy, and related shoplifting, thefts, and other crimes that go with it. I'm going to see an increase in burglaries, larcenies. See, because if I'm testing positive, I have a hard time holding a job in many workplaces. So I'm going to be unemployed. And guess what? The user, he's going to feed his habit. He's still going to survive. He's made choices, or she, as to what they value in life. I grew up in the 60s. Anybody else here? I see a couple of people, folks that might look like they might. Okay. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer or a judge. But I remember back in those days, we had a term for those who used marijuana heavily. We called them stoners. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't that they were sharp. It wasn't that they were in tune with what was going on, and they were stoners. You could pick them out. The difference, if we want to legalize research and a commitment to find out the elements of marijuana that may have medicinal value, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. But we want to legalize recreational use of marijuana, and that I strongly disagree with. I've been with the sheriff's office. I'm in my 40th year. 1976, I started with the Geauga County Sheriff's Office. I've seen the tragedy that substance abuse brings. I too many times have delivered what we in law enforcement refer to as a death message, notification. You get a traffic accident, someone's killed. We go tell the family. It's the worst job you can have. I've done it personally too many times. While I'm driving to the home, you're trying to think of the words. What is it I could say? Because the last time I did it, I didn't do good enough. And you're trying hard. How can I say this? And you pull up to the house, pull up the driveway, and you get out. And that's one call you always put your hat on. Is it respect? Is it trying to buy a few more seconds to think of the right words? I'm not sure. You walk up the driveway, the sidewalk, knock on the door, ring the doorbell. They're there pretty quick. They saw you pull in the headlights, whatever. And a greeting I've always gotten. Because, see, they know someone in their family's missing. Dad's not home, mom's not home, son, daughter, husband, wife. Somebody's not home. And a greeting I've always gotten, is everything okay? And the only words I've been able to come up with, I'm sorry. I had him say, oh my gosh, which hospital do I gotta go to? Is he okay? Is she okay? Is she gonna be okay? How bad is it? I'm sorry. If we pass issue 3, I'm gonna have a 92% increase in occasion to say I'm sorry. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Geauga Countyans, our community, our family and friends need better. Thank you.
We're going to give everybody here an opportunity to ask a question if you have a question, but I want to, if you permit me, make a couple of comments before we do that. I am a child of the 60s, by the way. I freely admit that. I used to have hair at one time. The other day we were talking to the coroner and in one of our budget hearings, and he told us a story about a lady who had been using marijuana, and because the marijuana had so put her in a sense of euphoria, she decided it'd be a great idea to snuff or to huff the spray that you spray keyboards with. It instantly crystallized her lungs. She died. He told us other stories, and we were talking to him about, you know, what his situation was within his office. And as these guys have already told you, their workloads are going to go up. And so I hate to say this, but I am sorry, because if their workload goes up, we're going to have to be coming back to the people in Geauga County and asking them for more money. We look at the budget, we work really hard to try and keep that budget in line, make sure we're using efficient use of the dollars and so on and so forth. That's sometimes a struggle. But at the end of the day, this is going to impact all of us. It's going to impact our kids, our grandkids. I have 10 grandkids. I fear for their future for a lot of the reasons that they had talked about. And that is, I fear for where they're going to go, what's their next play date going to be, and all that kind of stuff. I do have, I'll start off the questioning with this. I have 2 questions, actually, since we've got 3 attorneys sitting at the table. Craig is actually an attorney also. And 2 judges. Maybe they can answer this question. I had a citizen call me the other day and ask me this. I've actually contacted the Attorney General's office. I won't tell you what their response was. But the question asked was, how can we, since we've got a checklist that approves a ballot measure, approve a ballot measure that violates federal law? And the judges will be faced with the question in the courts. We've got an Ohio legal substance which is federally against the law, and how do they decide a particular case? That's their challenge, and I'm sympathetic with that. But I don't know if you have an answer to that question. How in the state of Ohio can we permit a ballot initiative that violates a federal law? I'm very confused at that. The other question that I have, and then I'm gonna, if anybody else has a question, you can come up. This court's about as long as what it would take to get to the center of that aisle. And that is, will businesses have the legal authority to disallow people to come into their establishments if they're smoking marijuana? And so, can they prohibit that? I don't know what the answer to that question will be. You might know the answer to that.
How would you know that? Because they smell like marijuana? I mean, how?
Well, they might be actually.
Well, you can't walk around. You can't publicly walk around and smoke it. So, and you can't drive around in your car and smoke it. So,
Okay, good.
unless they smell it or they're on their Doritos run, I mean, there's just you wouldn't know unless they smell. Oh, it's marijuana.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, unless you have possession of it. But again, if it becomes legal, you're allowed to have still 100 milligrams or less and possess it. So
So if you're walking around and you're in a park and you're
well, you
smoking.
can call the police. You can call law enforcement
so
if
law
someone's walking
enforcement-
around smoking it. Yeah.
And what will happen? Is law enforcement going to take this seriousness enough to pick them up, or is it going to be a misdemeanor to the effect that it's not worth the time?
Yeah, I can speak for Geauga County law enforcement, certainly. Yes, we are going to respond to those calls and take appropriate action based on what we find when we get there. Similar things do happen today. It is legal for an adult to drink alcohol. We do get calls. There's somebody just came into my store, my establishment, my whatever, and they appear intoxicated. They're drunk. Okay? There can be a law broken by being intoxicated out in public and putting the public at risk. So, yes, the response to calls of those nature by law enforcement would absolutely be taken seriously as part of the serve and protect aspect that we took our oath for.
Although I would
Go ahead.
suggest that that's why we live in Geauga County. We had the Juvenile Judges Association meeting in Seattle, Washington last year, and there was about 50 juvenile judges from the state of Ohio who went for a walk. We walked up on a park on Puget Sound that had about 150 people smoking marijuana. There was 2 police officers standing there. I walked up to the one and says, I didn't think it was legal to smoke it out in the open like that. He says, you're right, sir. He says, but we got more important things to have to worry about. And so you're going to have some enforcement issues. On your constitutional issue, you know, we are a bifurcated government. We have state law and constitutions and the federal laws and constitutions. The 10th and 11th Amendment allow the states to regulate certain things. And back in Prohibition, when you couldn't have alcohol, in the state of Kentucky, which happened to be the home of whiskey, or bourbon, they passed the state law that said you could have a pint of bourbon per week for medicinal purposes. And that was for every man, woman, and child, by the way, who got a prescription for a doctor to have bourbon. So if you had 9 kids, you got 11 pints of bourbon a week. It paid to have a big family if you like your bourbon. And they sold it in drugstores because it was sold by prescription. And the federal government, even though it had prohibited alcohol, as we know, it couldn't prohibit alcohol used for medicinal purposes under the Constitution of the state of Kentucky. And by the way, you can still buy bourbon in drugstores in Kentucky today because they never changed the law. So there's a question, and the Obama administration has already announced that they're not going to enforce the federal law prohibitions against marijuana, even though it's illegal under federal law, and see how this all, quote, shakes out with the states as we go forward. So federal law, like any law, is only as good as it's enforced. And at the top of the heap, they have declared they're not going to enforce this one. Therefore, I don't think the ballot board or the Attorney General or anybody else have the constitutional right to keep this off the ballot. Now there's a backside to it. It's called the Dormant Commerce Clause. And what's going to happen is, if this does pass, somebody's going to sue and challenge the monopoly nature, because you cannot have a monopoly in one state that precludes somebody from another state from coming in and do business. Remember those folks in Colorado and Washington who make marijuana? They'll be filing a lawsuit. They're going to file the lawsuit to open the doors in Ohio for them to sell their product here, and not exclusively to the 10 people in Ohio. And they will win that lawsuit because the Dormant Commerce Clause says that one state cannot keep out competing businesses of another state from doing business within their state if it's a legal business. So it won't be just 10 marijuana companies you're going to have to be worried about. It's going to be the boys from Colorado and the guys from Washington and the folks from Alaska. So don't be fooled by the 10. That number is a misnomer. There will be more litigation.
And also to add to that, we're also going to have lawsuits with Indiana, in Pennsylvania and Detroit, because right now, both Nebraska and Oklahoma have lawsuits pending against Colorado because of marijuana being over the cross borders.
Financial burden.
Yeah, and there's also a 2,000% increase in the number of Colorado mail parcels that have been intercepted, destined for other states that have had the product in it. So you're going to have that issue as well, which are all, again, going to be taxpayer dollars paying for, lawsuits and things of that nature. Some more money down the drain. Also, and the sheriff knows, is there still going to be laws that are going to need to be regulated. So you're also going to have the issue of, my neighbor has 6 marijuana plants growing in their house, but they're only allowed to have 4. So there's going to be more regulations are going to create more issues that need to be policed, and it's going to be more of a nuisance and more of a problem.
I think the occupational part that you got to think about too is there is interstate commerce. There's business it goes to the state. The trucking industry, okay, how does that impact the truck drivers who travel from state to state? How does that impact employees who reside here but travel to various states as part of their service area? Okay. I was shocked when two of our bigger employers in this county said, we won't go to Colorado. I think now we understand their dilemma.
And as Judge Shubika said, there's to be just short of 1,200 marijuana retail stores in Ohio. That's almost 4 times the amount of retail stores that are in Colorado. There are 322 retail stores in Colorado. So that's what we're going to be dealing with here, almost 4 times the amount of places that it can be sold.
Well, and I look at it, I know I deal with all the traffic, adult traffic laws in the county. You know, how are you going to measure it? If someone's got a baggie in their car that they're not smoking it, but they're allowed to possess it, is it the legally purchased baggie, or is it the illegally purchased baggie? And, you know, to determine if someone's under the influence, the best way to do that is blood and really urine screens. So we're going to have, you know, drivers peeing in a cup on the side of the road, or, I mean, you know, these laws have to be changed. There wasn't enough foresight to know, you know, to measure quickly enough. I mean, our legislators, unfortunately, tend to be a little slow in enacting things. So how big a gap are we going to have before laws are enacted to, you know, cover these changes in the law? So.
We have a question over here.
I just have a question. On the voting ballot, how will this be phrased? So if I'm against it, do I say yes, I vote yes because I'm against it, or no, don't yes if I'm against it? You know, are they going to twist the words around, or do we vote no?
The ballot wording, for whatever it's worth, and Walt here has the actual wording. You can find the actual wording on the Secretary of State's website under issues. It's very clear, but you vote no. If you don't like it, you vote no. If you want it, you vote yes. By the way, we have not talked about issue 2, which is the counter amendment that is supposed to prohibit monopolies and so forth. There's a lot of confusion out there right now on the street of what issue 2 is about and whether it's good, whether it's bad, and so on and so forth. But the intent of issue 2 is to push back on issue 3, and so for whatever that's worth.
Vote no on issue 2 as well then?
Well, that's an opinion thing, and there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of controversy.
If you don't want it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Issue 2 would prohibit monopolies from being placed in the Constitution by initiative petition. If you didn't like the fact that some really well-heeled people hijacked our Constitution to create 4 casinos in Ohio as a monopoly, and if you don't like the idea that 10 people are about to hijack the Constitution of Ohio to have the monopoly on marijuana growth and sales in Ohio, then you might like issue 2 because it's supposed to stop that from happening again and may prohibit the brothels from coming around the corner in the next 5 years. And you laugh, but they're the next on the list because people who know how to make money out of vice understand the greatest moneymaker is the brothel. It will generate more than marijuana and casinos combined. And so if you don't want monopolies in the Constitution, for the opiate parlors that used to be in this country in the 1880s, or the brothels that were legal in parts of this country even up to the 1930s, you might want to look at issue 2 pretty closely. And issue 2 was put on the ballot by the legislature. Issue 3 was put on the ballot by the people. And out of a quirk of our Constitution, issue 2, if it passes, goes into effect immediately, whereas issue 3 doesn't go into effect for 30 days. And so hopefully someone would make the argument that 2 prevents 3 if they both pass. That ultimately will be an issue that will be decided by the Ohio Supreme Court sometime about June of next year. But it would be nice to have them have that issue in front of them in case issue 3 passes.
Well, and you may laugh at Judge Brindle's comments about brothels, but as I said with WDEA, they said human trafficking has skyrocketed as a result of the drugs that are coming in, fentanyl, and they said, in working with Colorado, they said human trafficking is really up with regards to association or tandem with the legalization issue there, so.
And if you don't think human trafficking happens in Ohio,
It does.
the Toledo area is considered one of the highest areas of human trafficking in the United States. And we had human trafficking here in the brothels in Chesterland that Sheriff Dan was kind enough to close a few years ago. Several of the young women who were working in there were from foreign countries who were human trafficked into the United States and were forced into the trade in Chesterland and Geauga County.
Actually, they said today you don't have to go as far as Toledo. Cleveland's numbers have really skyrocketed with human trafficking.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, if it does get voted down, what's to say that it wouldn't be just like, and be probably unpopular saying this, but like gay marriage also got voted down. First in California, and the U.S. Supreme Court overturned that. What's to say they wouldn't do the same thing if the government wanted it to be legalized, for instance? to
Because
legalize-
being a stoner is not a protected class. The key to the gay marriage was that the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution applied to the states through the 14th Amendment needs a protected class. Females, males, minorities, people of a certain sexual orientation. Using drugs, at least yet, hasn't been declared a protected class in America, and I pray to God that's not on the horizon.
Right, well, I'm just saying, like, you know, that took our votes basically and said, you don't care what you think, you're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, well, just to comment on that, and I'm not an attorney, but just from a personal perspective, we've watched the casino efforts over the years, time and time again. When they fail, they come back. When they fail, they come back. If this fails, there is big money in this. The people who are pursuing this, and I think they're scumbags, to be honest with you. But the people who are, this is not the government. The ballot initiative, ballot 3, was put on there by citizens. The citizens were funded, this effort was funded by out-of-state money that was pushing this. And the only reason they're successful is because the citizens in the state of Ohio that wanted this, for whatever their reasons happened to be, they wanted to be able to go out and get high, and they probably could have, it was just minor, it was just illegal. And so, but they wanted to make this legal in the state of Ohio, and so they took this outside money to put on the ads that are spinning the truth in the wrong direction, and to put in, send out all flyers and all the stuff that they're doing to make this successful. If this fails, they will come back. The federal government is not going to pursue this unless, because there's no group of folks out there that are pushing this at the federal level, they could push this up through the Supreme Court. And I guess as I'm saying that, I'm wrong. There are people at the federal level, and Bernie Sanders, who's running for president, actually just said this here recently, that he'd like to see it legalized at the federal level also. But you're right, there are groups of people who are pushing this. They want it, and they will continue, and they're going to be under attack. Those of us who don't agree with this. And so that's just the nature of it, and we'll have to see where that goes.
I'd just like to make one addition, though. There is one person putting money in this campaign who is from Ohio. He's a Backstreet boy by the name of Nick Lachey. He is one of the 10 property owners who will benefit by having one of the 10 monopolies. You may have seen his commercial over the last weekend where he's bringing jobs and taxes to Ohio, per my reference earlier this evening. So there is some local money coming, because Nick Lachey is from Cincinnati.
Okay, that was my other question. How many of the rise in the things that have happened in Colorado are due to people moving there because it's legal there?
I mean,
Sure.
outsiders, like the non-Colorado people coming to Colorado?
Moving to Colorado because it's legal there and they can practice and, you know, basically use.
Well, they've done population, I don't know if they've connected the dots from people outside the state coming and creating. I can tell you the crime rate's up 10%. The black market is thriving. People 21, the day before they turn 21 and younger have to get their pot somewhere. And like Judge Grindell said, 50% are getting it from their home or people they know.
But are they moving in from out of state into?
They might not know that until the actual census is done, and that occurs every 10 years. So where crime and arrests and number of accidents are measured annually, our Geauga County population hasn't been measured since 2010.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think a lot of those homeless people the sheriff referred to are coming, they're visiting Colorado on the new tourist plan. Come and smoke in town, have one on us. So I think those numbers are probably important. I think the school numbers and a lot of the traffic numbers are homebred Coloradoans who aren't
Sure.
dealing too well with their marijuana. I will tell you this, the Probate Judges Association was supposed to have their annual meeting in Colorado, and they decided not to out of a concern about traffic safety in Colorado because of the marijuana situation. So, I mean, when the probate judges don't want to party in Colorado, you know it must be tough, so.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I guess I have a question after listening to all the information presented here this evening. The seriousness of this situation seems to touch almost every aspect of everything involved. You know, law enforcement, and the judge sits, and you know, the medical ramifications and all. I guess what I don't understand is we've been bombarded on television for the last 3 months with all these people touting all the greatness of all this marijuana. How come there's never been any pushback from anyone? And I don't know who would have been the person responsible or what agency would have been responsible, but as far as I'm concerned, there's been very, very little pushback and very little information really presented to the general public in regard to this whole situation and how serious it really is.
That is very accurate. It has to.
Where's that
Well, it's been more
information
of a
supposed to
grad-
come from?
It's more, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Like,
Well, it's okay. I'm just, you know.
Well, those that are proponents of it have about $40 million in their coffers. And a lot of the reason there's been maybe a delay in the opposition, the opposition was waiting to know that for sure it was going to be on the ballot, that the petitions were garnered, and then they started. But most of the people in opposition are either public servants. Our agencies don't have the money for that, or 501c3s. There's restrictions on how much you can use for the advertising against it or opposition. It's been either by word of mouth. I know there's some people here who are on parents against or committee members against legalization. So it's been grassroots efforts that has been the way to do it and across the state because funds have been lacking.
Part of it's the problem. When one group is going to come into a market and make billions, they'll spend 40 million. But there's no competing industry that's going to pay for the counter ads. The illegal drug guys are going to create a pack paid for by the Mexican cartels because they have trouble justifying that in other areas. And so this happened with the casinos. 20 years ago when Mr. Spitzer tried to put a casino on the Black River, the Catholic Church who had bingo, the horse track that had the only legalized gambling in Ohio, really the horses, and the Lottery Commission, all put up $1 million and they killed his ballot initiative to create a casino on the Black River. Fast forward, when Mr. Gilbert and his boys came, they got smart. I mean, the Catholic Church bingo was dead and they had other issues that they were trying to deal with. The Lottery Commission was brought into it. I mean, the gambling is through the Lottery Commission, so they got their cut of the pie. And the horse tracks got caught in with the promise that they would get their machines, which they now have, their slot machines, within a so many year period. And so there was nobody to fund the counter ads. Nobody's there to fund these counter ads because nobody's going to make money from preventing the use of the marijuana per se. There are ads out now that have come out in the last 2 weeks that are sponsored by a group that have on the ads law enforcement, police associations are against marijuana, some newspapers are, nurses are, I think some teachers and hospitals. So somebody's finally come up with some money. In my opinion, a little late, and unfortunately, Dennis has the best ad ever. The ad they should have had was the 27-year-old stoner who got up there and said, I don't know what all this talk about marijuana being good for. My life was ruined by marijuana. Why would anybody in their right mind want to legalize this stuff? Instead, they got the usual color ad from Columbus that, it looks like it was made out of Political Consultants 101 with the stock pictures and all that stuff. Meanwhile, the ads for the pro-marijuana people are a Colorado couple with a 4-year-old child. And I sat with the guild from St. Anselm's, and every one of those nice ladies there were telling me they were voting for issue 3, and I was having epilepsy because they didn't want their grandchildren to have to go to Colorado to get marijuana. I said, you really think your child's going to have to go to Colorado to get medical assistance? Come on, get serious. And then I went to, we did the red ribbon ceremony at Kester this week, and I mentioned that this is both medical and recreational marijuana, and 20 parents came up to me and said, it's really recreational marijuana? We saw the ads that it's about medical marijuana. So not only are we having problems with the ads,
their ads were good, and their ads got out early, and they weren't responded to, and they've taken the high ground.
But I do think there is some, I mean, the grassroots level is working, because I think about 3 weeks ago when we did this, the polls, the Quinnipiac polls were showing that it was going to pass by, I think 57% was going to pass, and I think the numbers have gone down.
It's getting,
It's getting closer, so,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
closer.
there is a grassroots, you know,
And the question is for each of you to go home tonight and educate 10 people
Right.
about the problems with issue 3, and ask them tomorrow to educate 10 people, and we still got about 4 or 5 days left, so if the chain works right, each one of you can get 50 people to vote against issue 3. Multiply that times that room and all your relatives, and there's still hope. So the message when you leave here today is don't leave it at the door, pick up the phone, tell your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, and get them to tell their friends and neighbors and relatives, and let's see if we still got time to turn the vote. And by the way, the Leachers should be congratulated for what they're doing.
There is a grassroots group, a lot of us parents and citizens that are very much against this passage, of course, because it will ruin lives and it'll ruin young people's lives. But we don't have any money, but we've put money into it ourselves personally. And stickers on the News Herald, if you saw that on Sunday's paper, those were paid for by volunteers and the grassroots people. And people have paid for the display ads that have been in the Chagrin Valley Times and the Solon Times and Maple Leaf and the Chesterland News. Yes, and I mean, this is all paid for by just people like us who are very much against it, know that it'll ruin the young people's lives and everyone's lives, and the traffic accidents and everything. So that's why you haven't seen the big time things on TV, but unfortunately, that's what you see, and hopefully, you know, you'll contact other people and get them the information, because, you know, we're gonna be out stuffing paper boxes this weekend, but you can just do so much, but we need everyone's help. We need about 4,000 more people here tonight. And I give these people credit because that's a lot of their time.
And like anything, I know all of us up here, and I'm sure all of you sitting in this room, just be educated, whether it's a candidate, an issue, read about it if you want. You know, I was on a radio show about this the other day, and Ian James came on and said, oh, this 182-page report, you know, is just by prohibitionists. Well, if you call school statistics and emergency room statistics and those kinds of things, well, if you want to call them prohibitionists, but it's facts. Any of you can go on this. It's the website is RM Rocky Mountain H high, no pun intended, intensity I D drug T trafficking A area.org. So it's Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area.org. You can access it. I think it goes, you come up to the website, you go to reports, and it'll give you it's an annual report for the last 3 years. You can get pretty much everything that we've quoted as statistics is accessible to the public, so that we just aren't sitting here making up facts and statistics about this, because, you know, unless they're putting, you know, inaccurate facts in their reports, but this is, you know, disseminated to all, like, BCI, FBI, DEA, and all those working in law enforcement.
Let me just speak to the advertising issue for just a second. I spoke at a church this past Sunday, and people from 3 counties were there. There were several hundred people, and I spoke on this issue. And I delineated for those people what was in the document that you had in your hand a while ago, Walt, was basically what is being proposed. And these people almost fell out of the pew. They said, my Lord, I didn't know it was that involved. I didn't know it was going to be in the Constitution. You mean it's recreational too, not medical? Now, if we're reduced down to who has the best ads in order to win an issue, that suggests that sometimes we get the leaders we deserve because people don't take the time to find out what the dickens is going on. We, of all people, ought to know what's in that We ought to know what's proposed, and people around us ought to know that too. And that's word of mouth. And I'm sorry if their ads are better than our ads, but they've got money and whatever. But that again goes back to what I was talking about a while ago. You can deal with the agent that hosts the environment, but a lot of times, if the public won't be informed, and I applaud the commissioners for making a valiant attempt to get the public informed tonight, but I'm afraid, again, we may be preaching to the choir yet once again. But the thing is, people really don't know what's involved with this. They don't know how far-reaching it is. And to me, that's even more depressing than the issue itself, that people aren't informed, they're not educated, and it's all out there for them, but they want somebody to give them a slick ad to convince them one way or the other, and that sets you up for all kinds of difficulty. So, but I appreciate you bringing that point up.
On that point real quick, by the way, I don't know how many of you here go to church, but our churches have let us down, because they should be speaking about this. And I go to church, and I haven't heard about this, and I'm upset, and I'm going to be talking to my pastor about it. But, you know,
Catholic diocese put out throughout all the masses last week.
we've got an unfortunate situation in our society today where we're allowing things to happen that shouldn't be happening. There's good news in this, and this is, these things are not permanent if we choose not to make them permanent. It's hard to change the constitutional amendment, but it's not impossible. And so if we get excited enough, and we get other people excited enough, it is possible to reverse this, even if it passes. It's a long shot, but it is possible. And so just file that away for whatever that it's worth, and do as some have said here tonight, go back and tell people. If the last thing that you want to do is go home tonight and lament on how bad it is, and then don't tell anybody about it.
I do have some handout information from the Chardon Community Action Team, from Drug Free Action Alliance. We do have a strong professional organization out there for drug and alcohol prevention, which is where I come from. And and the ads, we were able to get some ads in our local paper, and I do have some copies of that, so I'll put this out so people have it.
That's a major problem right there. People do not know where to look to get information. They go to their computers, and the media pushes everything that they want you to hear, period. So you don't know what you're reading, if it's truth or not. Even if you go on different websites, there's not enough people here to even go on the websites that you need to go on to find out this information. And that's what's so frustrating. We watched the media do it with the convention, the Republican debate last night. It was horrible, and that's, I think, spreading like wildfire. But word of mouth doesn't spread.
There's Dave Lair, our county administrator, good guy over here. Just let me know, by the way, if you go to our Geauga County website, there'll be a video of this entire thing, which is one of the reasons we wanted to do this, so we can get the word out to the best of our ability. I mean, we have limited ability to do that and so forth. But if you went home and you sent people to our website and had them look at the presentation you heard tonight, they're going to hear what you heard, and you can spread the word. That's just another tool to help get the word out.
The Farm Bureau also recently came out against issue 3, and they have signs if anybody wants them. I know people like to put signs up, so you can contact your local Farm Bureau to get them a no on 3 sign.
You know, thanks, Nancy. An interesting thing about this, and you know, this is pretty scary stuff. The interesting thing about this is I've not seen an issue like this that has brought together such diverse groups in opposition. The League of Women Voters, who they and I don't normally see eye to eye on issues, we see eye to eye on this. They oppose this. Our legislator opposed this. We oppose this. We as county commissioners. Most of the folks in the agencies and so forth oppose this. There are a lot of groups that oppose this. Unfortunately, we didn't react quickly enough. I don't watch the news. I personally was unplugged, and this didn't even hit my radar until a month or so ago, where I'd have been a lot more active personally in this. And a lot of people may be in that same situation. But we are where we are, and we got to deal with what we've got in the way that we can. So there's some opportunity and some tools to at least try to spread the word on this.
Commissioner info I did want to add, because Sarah Fowler, who was at our last presentation, who's one of the state school board members, said in all the history of the state school board, there was never an issue that the school board thought enough of one way or another to vote on it. She said the state school board took a vote on this and came out against issue 3. That's how much it meant to the educational department of our state. So.
Yes, I was wondering, was any of the media, such as GTV or any newspapers, invited to come this evening?
Well, we do have one of the papers here tonight, and that's Maple Leaf, right? And TV is always invited. They didn't show up. The Chagrin Valley Times, they knew about it tonight. They didn't show up.
In defense of GTV, they are not countywide. They do not cover. I mean, that doesn't mean, you know, we talked about that when we asked to have the commissioners' meetings televised. We could get them to come in and do it, but only the people in the Munson, Chardon, Hamden, I don't know if Burton still gets it, or I don't know. It's a very select viewing area, and that's why we chose as commissioners that, and for budgetary reasons, to film these ourselves and put them on our website on a YouTube site. So you could see the discussions that we have or this evening's by going to that. I'm not sure if GTV did if they did anything in front of any other audiences, like the schools or something like that. I haven't followed that. But using them is difficult for us because people in Parkman aren't going to see it.
The only thing I can
we live in the village of Middlefield, and I know we have access to GTV, and we appreciate their programming that they serve.
But they do a wonderful job. They just don't do it in 16 townships. That's the only issue.
And another thing too, I mean, this is the day and age of, you know, Facebook, Instagram. You could probably find a link, post it on your Facebook page, you know, share it with, you know, whoever you're friends with. It's another quick way, you know, to get it out there, and hopefully they can, you know, advocate for them to share it too, or any other links that you find, you know. I mean, it's a great way to get word out quick.
Wasn't the Westwoods presentation put
That
out?
was also put out there too.
On YouTube? I didn't hear.
It's on YouTube. It's on the auburn.org website.
Yes, so there was the previous presentation. Thank you for doing that.
Is there a possibility that we can do something as far as, you know, making a pledge to be able to maybe have a last effort as far as a call that could be put out, like on one of those robotic style calls, where we could, you know, possibly, you know, have the sheriff, have the judges, whoever it was, to be able to do a last minute effort to be able to create a call. And I'm willing to put up, you know, half of the cost of the call, and I think that we have more than enough people here to put up the rest of it. And, you know, as far as the sheriff, as far as the chief law enforcement officer, the county, the judges want to participate, I think that, you know, as a county and as a group, you know, to have our officials be able to, you know, put something out there as far as a last ditch effort before the voting, to be able to just, you know, make one last hoorah. I'm in 50% right now.
And that's a really good suggestion, because robocalls are relatively inexpensive relative to a marketing perspective. Now, you have a limited audience, because you have to have phone numbers and that kind of stuff. I don't have that phone number system, but
Very
it's a good idea. It's a good attempt. I don't know mechanically how you go about that.
You gotta do it tomorrow.
Right.
You wanna make the calls this weekend, you got a place tomorrow.
I will say there is some
It's doable,
positive.
but you gotta do it tomorrow.
There is some positive feedback coming back, and that Responsible Ohio, it's my understanding, thought this was going to generate a lot of absentee voting and early voting. Actually, as of yesterday, it was reported it's actually below average right now. And my thoughts were too, they did this great push on college campuses, getting those petitions signed. I wonder how many college students really had the forethought to say they have to do absentee voting as well. They can't find the food, where's my car?
Too
No.
busy.
So,
Can I make a suggestion that robot call is a good idea? Is it possible to put for the caller ID, say, Geauga Sheriff? Because personally speaking, if we didn't get anonymous calls and private calls, we probably wouldn't get any phone calls. We pretty much don't pick them up. I'm serious.
Yeah,
You know, and we just don't pick them up anymore because sometimes they're just dead calls anyway, or who knows. It's just a thought, if you put like Geauga Sheriff, oh wow, what I do now is, you know, you'll be where
I'll have to talk to the sheriff and see if he wants it on his,
I don't know that that can mechanically be done, that you could clone a piece of equipment to say it is.
Well, it's just a thought.
Because if that was, then all the robocalls you get trying to get you to donate your
Would
car
say
and
it's
different,
from
would
the
say it's
Geauga
from
County
the
Sheriff. Although if you have Time Warner, it comes on your screen who the call is from, so.
That's not happening now, it will be happening
Right.
soon.
That's a great thought.
It's great, I appreciate the
Right.
suggestion, I just don't think, I think there's FCC regulations
Right.
about,
But you would still leave the
misrepresenting
message
who you
anyway,
are.
right? Even if you didn't pick up, you'd still leave the message.
I think we've got some things that we can talk about in order to see if we can make that happen. And we'll work with some of our technical people, and if we can get some.
I do know statewide too, though, there's been a number of organizations, the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association, all 88 sheriffs have taken, this is bad for Ohio, it goes on, I mean, the different court groups, et cetera, and again, can't speak for all areas, but there's many of these little meetings in smaller groups, and it is a grassroots effort.
I just saw what the Small Business Association has sent out, and it's fabulous that they sent and also gave out at meetings. I mean, it's
Encouraging their membership
exactly to vote against.
vote a certain direction as well. So
Exactly.
there is things going on, not that we want to pull short and give up, but and I think that effort is one of the reasons we're seeing, although they stepped out front with the advertising campaign, that gap has closed significantly.
Which goes back to, elections are one that voter turnout. So I go back to my point, call 10 of your relatives, to have 10 relatives, and don't just talk to them, make sure they show up to vote, because this is going to be one who lost at the turnout. Yeah, it's going to be one who lost at the turnout.
Back there, she's been turning and she.
Was there a question back there?
I have a couple questions. I expected this room to be filled to capacity. How did you advertise this? Any, other than computers, I mean, anything in the paper media, Maple Leaf, Chester News?
Yep, we have the Maple Leaf.
Okay, I expected this.
We organized it rapidly, and so we had some limited exposure, but we did use a variety of email lists and the Maple Leaf. So I expected the room to be fuller than it is
These
too.
people, did you reach out to the state, at the state level? Isn't there anyone who, at the state level, who is willing to put something out to last minute effort to inform the people of
Well,
what?
I will make a suggestion to you. Reach out to John Eklund and Sarah Latourette as your state representatives and ask them if there's something that they can do.
I will tell you, the Attorney General, Mike DeWine, just came out last week after a visit to Colorado, and there was a great article, it's also, I believe, on his Attorney General website about how he's in opposition to it. So at the state level, I don't know if Governor Kasich has come out and said anything publicly, but like I said, Mike DeWine just last week.
Well, keep in mind, we're very close. I mean, next week we're voting, right? So the most effective thing you can do right now is what Judge Gundel said. Go out and talk to 10 of your friends. Ask them to talk to 10 of their friends. Direct people to the website, our website, to take a look at the video and pray. If you're a church-going person, pray, because we need to have this go down. We'll talk more about the robocall and if that's possible to do and how we might be able to put that together quickly.
Thank you.
One other thing, if you have friends or relatives or anybody in the other part of the state, I think we're in fairly good shape here, but heaven knows what's going on down in southern Ohio. So if you know people in other parts of Ohio, email them, call them, whatever, and let them know this is what they should say.
So I'd like to thank the board members, all of our panel members who took their valuable time to come out here tonight. You got something out of it. I'd like for you to show some appreciation to them for what they did. Thank you, I appreciate that. Any questions in the back, John?
Just one final comment, just for full disclosure, the gummy bears from Judge Rendell are not
I don't know, I saw him staggering in here tonight, I'm not so sure. Thank you all for coming, I hope you got something out of it, I appreciate it. We have a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Being adjourned.
Yeah, yeah.